What's up, and welcome to a very special episode of First Geek 411. I'm your host, Cameron Franklin, and with me, as always, from West Coast, Best Coast, is Emma. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Can't complain. It's been a good time. Been a good week.
Nice. Um, this week, we are doing a different thing. It's been a minute since we've done one of these. I guess Agatha All Along was the last time that we did a spoiler cast, and so
Yeah.
we're going to catch up, kind of chat about what we've been up to, and then dive into spoilers. For Captain America Brave New World. Did we like it? Did we hate it? Did we love it? Was it the best movie ever? Was it the worst movie ever? Stay tuned to find out. Insert
You'll see
hyperbole
soon.
clickbait stuff. And so,
Yep.
but before we catch up, as a reminder to everyone, you can find us around the internet as OneGeek411. Join that Discord server. Shoot us an email at 1stgeek411@gmail.com. Watch live on Twitch around 7:30 Mountain Time, and then you can also watch live on YouTube as well as find the VODs over on our YouTube channel. If you are watching on YouTube, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what you thought of the movie so that we can please the algorithm. And then, of course, you can find our Redbubble store. So sometimes when we do spoiler casts, we don't do a what we've been up to. Like, we don't do that. I think I like the idea of doing it because it gives us more padding until spoilers happen. And so it
Yeah.
gives us, I have a nice visual indicator for when we actually get into spoiler territory. But I like this as just like, hey, if you're coming in, here's like the cutoff. Or if
Be
you're one of the kind of
warned.
people that's watching this
Spoilers.
that hasn't seen the movie, appreciate you hanging out for the non-spoiler
Yeah.
chat. That helps out the
We're very
algorithm
much on
stuff
top
too.
of it this time around. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's very uncommon for us to like actually get
yeah.
a spoiler cast like so close to a movie release just based on actually getting people together. And so
Yeah.
before we jump into it, let's catch up on what we've been up to. Emma, how has your past week been?
It's been good. Saturday night was the one shot that I have talked about in the past for the Crooked Moon sort of like supplemental material for
Mm-hmm.
D&D that's kind of like inspired by Over the Garden Wall, and it was so much fun. There were like base worms in a meteor and um lots of weird like monstrous nurses and things, and it was super cool. And we were all level 7, so I got to play a level 7 druid for the first time, which
Nice.
was great. But we also got, our DM was great and gave us all like, we got a +1 weapon and like a rare item. So I had like a woodland staff that had additional spells that I could use. It had 10 charges, and one of the
Oh, that's
spells
pretty
was a
cool.
level 6 spell, Awaken, where if you encounter a creature or living thing that has a base intelligence of 3 or less, you can hike up the intelligence to base 10, and it uses 6 of the 10 charges from the staff. And I picked the staff because that just sounded cool. I didn't know what we were going to be doing. And there was a moment where I ended up using it on these hive mind worms in the meteor, and it threw the DM for a complete loop. And he was like, "Oh no, I'm gonna have to build a mini boss encounter right here in the moment
That's great.
because now this thing with lower than 3 intelligence now has 10 intelligence." And it was the best moment, and it was so great. And it just reminded me of how much chaos goes
Mm-hmm.
into being a druid and how much you can throw a DM for a loop the higher levels you get. And it was so fun. um and it was all like, all the other characters were great and we had a blast, and I would absolutely play with that group again. So it was a lot of fun. Also on Saturday, I did some more gardening. I got my second raised bed filled with dirt, and I got veggies planted. So in a few months, I'm going to have lots of veggies, hopefully, which is going to be fun.
Nice.
I finally got things planted at a reasonable time for living in LA, because it's not blistering hot yet, and we actually had some rain, so that helps with watering. And then this last week, last but certainly not least, courtesy of me just kind of doing my job, I accidentally broke Tumblr.
Proud of you.
In reference specifically to a very specific and outspoken fandom on Tumblr. And all I can really say is I now have memes that I want to print out and frame and hang up on my wall because I was just doing my job and they all took it and ran with it. And it's great. So that's a very hard thing to do, break Tumblr fandoms. And I somehow managed to do that. So I am very proud of myself. And that's that.
Nice. I'm super proud. You sent me the memes, and they're fantastic.
I don't know a lot about memes.
I don't know a lot about the fandom, so I'm kind of just like going off vibes. But
yeah,
A+ memes.
They are great memes. As someone who does know about the fandom, they are great memes, and I love them. People keep calling me Misha Collins, who's one of the actors from the show, and it's like the biggest compliment in the world that a fandom could give you, this one in particular. So I'm just like, you know what? I'll take it. So that's been my week. It's been a lot of sitting on Tumblr, doing my job. So, yeah.
Nice. For me, kind of has been continuing a lot of the similar things that I have been doing. Have a couple specific updates that are pretty cool, but I finished Infinity Alchemist. I actually thought I had finished this last week, and I guess I did not. I was going to get the author for the other book that I have started, and realized that it was marked as complete like during the week. So Infinity Alchemist is by Kaysen Callender, and so it's a fictional like fantasy, like kind of built on alchemy, but it's not even like really alchemy. It's kind of like there's a lot of like mind over matter versus alchemy in the sense of like mixing things together is more of what like I thought this was going to be. And so it's cool that it wasn't just like straight up exact normal alchemy, but so I enjoyed that. That's where my Mad Bird Discord book club. And so that's my February book because our theme for February were books by Black authors as well as fantasy. And so I found a fantasy book by a Black author and got both of them. And then after I finished that, on the recommendation of the Tome Books Discord, I started Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. And so this is a kind of ghost story-esque fantasy, like modern fantasy, about a girl who works at Yale. And there's a whole bunch of like hauntings and like secret societies, that kind of stuff. Ooh. And so I've been really enjoying that. I'm like maybe a quarter of the way through it right now. So I'll potentially have it done by next week and can talk about it some more. But it's very cool. It's kind of has some similar vibes to the Control video game for people that have played that. Although like with ghosts versus like paranormal, like the other types of paranormal, but it kind of has some of those vibes. And so, and then, other kind of general weekly updates. I went and played Lorcana again, and I improved to going 2-1. I remembered my card that is in my deck to help me win, and I used it this time to win.
Nice.
And so,
nice.
Instead of just like punting the game on the final turn when I had the win on board. And so I'm pretty happy. I feel like I'm starting to get a better hang of the deck, and I'm starting to recognize cards that other people are playing.
Good.
Versus just being like having to ask what every single card is. And so that's been pretty cool. My only loss was to a person playing like the complete version of the deck that I'm playing. And so like, I'm pretty like, as far as having a loss goes, I'm pretty like happy with that one being the loss.
Yeah.
Just because like, my deck is kind of hedging because of the cards that I'm missing. My deck is hedging to beat aggro decks, not other control decks. And so this was my first time playing like another true control deck, and they got me very good. And so, but it's been fun. And then kind of with that, this week has been the reveals of the upcoming Lorcana set that drops next month. And so even though like I've been like collecting and kind of picking up Lorcana cards throughout release, this is the first time I've like actually paid attention to the cards that are coming out, in the sense of like, are they actually good? Are they cards that I would want to play in my deck? How do I need to worry about them in cards in decks that other people are playing? And so it's been really fun to kind of look at the set through that lens, similar to like kind of what Chris and I used to do with Magic, where we used to do like our top cards and stuff like that. And so that's been really fun as well. On top of just getting to like hang out with people and chat. And then I think I mentioned this end of last week, or maybe it was even post show, but I guested for Twig over with the Checkpoint Church YouTube channel. That's This Week in Geek, kind of similar content to what we do normally here. And so we chatted about the PlayStation State of Play, talked a little Lorcana over there as well, kind of releases that we're excited about that are coming soon. And so it was very fun. I was awesome chatting with Nate. And then the final thing that I have been up to, other than our topic of the show, is on this past Saturday, after quite a while away, finally back with some more Candela Obscura, playing my Bobby Newport from Parks and Rec character, and just having a good time being the comic relief. And it was a great chat. And we ended up starting a little late because someone had really bad traffic. So I had a good chat with our GM. And so kind of is cool getting to kind of talk about that, because she was in my D&D game, and then now she's running this one. And so it's kind of fun to have those kinds of conversations. And so that went really well. Excited to be back. And then, yeah, that's kind of the big things that I have been up to as well. Of course, let us know what you have been up to. If you're watching Twitch or watching live, you can let us know in the @live chat, or if you're watching later, hit us up in the comment section. So with that, let's jump into our topic of the week, which is our Captain America Brave New World spoiler cast. So the thing is on the stream, spoilers are happening. From this point on, spoilers are allowed. We're not necessarily going to go straight into discussing spoilers, because we're kind of just going to chat about the movie a little bit, but we are now entering spoiler zone for all Marvel, period. Like, I don't necessarily think we're going to go spoiler like a random Fantastic Four comic, but like, you never know. Like,
yeah.
And so I do want to call out that this is going to be kind of as part of the discussion. This is not just spoilers for Brave New World itself. So
spoilers for
before we get
MCU as a whole.
Yeah, and like we'll definitely have some comic discussions and some stuff like that as part of our conversations here as well. But yeah. So as kind of an overview, Brave New World released February 14th here in the United States. And then it is the 35th Marvel Cinematic Universe film. And
Wild.
It is a sequel to The Incredible Hulk, which was the second MCU film, as well as a sequel, of course, to Captain America 4 or Captain America 3 Civil War, and is a sequel to Eternals. And then it is a pretty direct pickup from Falcon and the Winter Soldier Disney Plus show.
Yeah.
And so this show centers around Sam Wilson, who has become Captain America at the end of Endgame. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the plot later on. And so I'm trying to think if I had anything else. Originally, the subtitle was New World Order, but it was changed to Brave New World. And then it also apparently had some pretty extensive reshoots end of 2024 before it released. And so, but before we get into the plot itself, Em, kind of as some overview, what are your thoughts on the previous Captain America movies, and then what are your thoughts on like MCU as a whole as well as MCU recently?
Previous Captain America movies in general, top tier. Like some of the better Marvel movies. Like they're in the higher, if we're talking about like tiers, because that's something we do. In my head, they're pretty solidly up there. Some of the iconics, Civil War, amazing in my opinion. Winter Soldier, and then the first one, love them all. As I've mentioned in the past year and a half, 2 years, recent Marvel stuff has just not been landing for me as much as I would have liked it to as a big Marvel fan. I still haven't seen the most recent Guardians of the Galaxy movie because I saw Black Widow and the Eternals, and both of those just really put me down and out. And I'm like, So I haven't really been watching stuff. I haven't seen the Marvels either. So I'm behind on that stuff. So I've just been like very not in touch with a lot of Marvel stuff recently. And so I went to see this one yesterday so that we could talk about it. And my hope for the franchise is slowly returning. Slowly. But it is. So that's generally where I am. I'm like, okay, we're getting back into like the Marvel world that we've built and established for almost 20 years. Like 17 years at this point. Yeah. Just from the quick math off the top of my head. And it's feeling much more good. But that's the general overview.
Yep. Yeah. I know for me, we're pretty much in line when it comes to the Captain America movies. I think it's very hard to argue that Winter Soldier and Civil War are not like two of the best MCU movies, period.
Just straight up.
As someone who had never really liked Captain America, like I think Captain America, the First Avenger is like a pretty good movie, and it's a really good introduction to the character. Like, yeah, I kind of put that in like a similar boat to like how I feel about the upcoming Fantastic Four movie of like, I am by no means a Fantastic Four movie. Obviously the previous movies have never really done much for that fandom, but like the first one was okay. But like culturally they were never like important. And so like kind of how I feel like, so then it's this new Fantastic Four movie's job to make us actually care about the Fantastic Four. And so that's kind of how I felt going into Captain America, the First Avenger. And overall, I mean, it helps that Chris Evans did a great job with the character. Yeah. But overall, really excited. I really like that movie. It's not my favorite introduction movie, like, or origin movie, but like I liked it a lot. And then broadly speaking, MCU, I think I have seen every film. I think the Hulk was the only like one I had to double back and watch when we were doing our tier list. And since then I have stayed caught up. I'm not caught up on all of the like spinoffs. Like I haven't seen the Spider-Man animated series that's going on. But I think generally speaking, I have seen pretty much all the MCU content. And then I'm an enjoyer of things. So I, broadly speaking, have enjoyed like phases 4 and 5 more than the normal person, or more than the normal on the internet person. By no means do I think they're perfect. And we'll talk about that some with this movie as well. But generally speaking, I come at things from enjoying them a bit more. My favorite way that this showed up, I'll plug some other content of ours, is our Black Widow Spoilercast, where like, I think I'm like tier list, that movie's a D, and y'all were all as an F, and I'm like the defender of this movie that I didn't even like that much, but like I'm just not as down. I'm just not as down on it. And so, and not, like, again, it's probably one of my least favorite MCU movies, but it was just like a funny way that things shook out for us.
Yeah.
And so, I do think there's some interesting connections between Black Widow and Captain America that we'll talk about, or Captain America Brave New World that we'll talk about a little bit later on. And yeah. And then next question, I can go first on this, but high level, what are your thoughts? To me, I think this movie is good. I think it is not great. I think it is also not nearly as awful as a lot of the like reviews put it out to be. And not even to the extent that I disagree with the reviews. Like, I just think like when people look at reviews, especially numerical reviews, anything that's not like a 7 or above is considered bad.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's a fair way. I don't think that's what the reviewers are intending to say. But like, for this being like one of the lowest scored MCU movies boggles my mind.
Yeah.
Again, not that I think it's best. It's not even top tier for me. I said on Blue Sky, I think this is probably like a low B, high C for me when it comes to tier. But broadly speaking, I liked this movie and I thought it was good, not great.
We are in very similar boats. This is lower mid tier for me. Like, I definitely came out of it going like, well, there's definitely considerably better Marvel movies that I've seen it over the past however many years. But I also didn't feel like I wasted my $30 on a ticket to go see it in IMAX. Like, it was a good time. Granted, I also, as someone who works in the film industry, was sitting there for a good chunk of time. The parts of it that I hated the most are two things in specific. One, there was definitely some dialogue that needed to be rewritten because it just was not natural. Like, no one would say something like this in this way, especially when they're talking to someone they're familiar with. And two, the bad guy, what he was doing and his reasons for it were given to us in the same way that a parent answers a toddler's question of just like trying to answer it on the surface level and dismiss. Like, here's what he's doing, we're going to move on now. Yep. That is the shortest form way that I can explain that, of like, he's mind controlling people by flashing a light in their face and then playing a song. And for a franchise that's known to go into extreme detail on how bad guys do things, you're just gonna hand us bright light, song, the person does something because they're mind controlled.
Yep.
That's kind of bland. Okay?
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest.
I completely agree.
Like, he just has a bunch of people's medical documents and then he's going to flash a light in their face and play a song and then they're going to try and shoot the president.
Yeah. It's the most hand-wavy science.
Yeah, it's very much like, and it's like...
Of like, why did this work? Because he has their genetic code. Duh. Yeah. Everyone knows that you can mind control people with flashing lights if you have their genetic code.
Literally, in the very third Marvel movie to ever exist, which was Thor's origin story, you have an entire scientific camp set up to explore the fact that his hammer is welded to the ground. Like, you can't just hand us a generic document, wave your hand, and go, oh yeah, this works, don't think about it too hard. Like, no, that's not the world you set up for yourself.
Yeah.
So, like, that's a lot of where my complaints come in, is like, it was enjoyable. I had a good time, but like, I know this franchise. I know how they give you information and how much information they give you. And that was like, lackluster. So like, that's where I know that's not high level, but that's where all of my nitpicking comes in.
Nothing wrong with that. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to jump into characters, then kind of talk plot overview, or talk specific like comments on the plot and stuff like that. I want to do a quick, like very high level rundown. This is me like skimming the Wikipedia of the plot. And so the movie opens with Thaddeus Ross, portrayed by Harrison Ford, being elected as president of the United States. And then several months later, Sam and Joaquin Torres are sent to Mexico to go and retrieve a sample of something. We will later find out what it is, but they don't know at this point. When doing the when going on doing that retrieval, they end up fighting some Sidewinder from the Serpent Society, who ends up technically being relevant later, I guess. And then they end up retrieving the sample, come back to the United States, and then we have a very strange training sequence with Isaiah Bradley, who returns from the Falcon and Winter Soldier show, and who was a previous attempt at replicating the super soldier serum, and then was imprisoned and experimented on by the U.S. government. After this, Wilson and Torres are invited to a summit at the White House, and they bring Bradley along with them. President Ross asks Wilson about reforming the Avengers, which Sam has obvious hesitancies with. And then we learn that the sample is adamantium, which is being mined out of Celestial Island from the end of Eternals. It's happened, everyone. Put your pitchforks down. The giant celestial head has finally been addressed. And so...
Took them long enough.
Yeah. So while working on a treaty between the United States, France, India, and Japan, because we definitely could not have any country that we actually have a geopolitical issue with be the villain of this movie. It's like two of our longest allies. We find out that Japan is the first country to have successfully refined adamantium into like what we would think of it as the metal that will probably eventually lace some Wolverine's bones. And
just
during
maybe.
this time, Mr. Blue starts to play, and four people begin to shoot at the president. Here we meet a former Black Widow named Ruth Bat Saraf, and through all of this, we end up taking down the shooters, except for Isaiah Bradley, who runs out of the White House. Sam has to follow him, and eventually Isaiah comes to from the mind control that in the middle of a park and doesn't know how he got there. Bradley is then imprisoned again, and Sam goes to visit him in prison, talks with him a little bit. Brutally sad scene. And then we go and eventually find out about how the mind control is working, and find out about Camp Echo 1, which is a military black site. Sam and Joaquin go to Camp Echo 1, where they meet Samuel Stern, aka the leader from the original, or from like the very end of the original Incredible Hulk movie. They like finally like find out what this character has been up to. And while there, we get a little bit of villain monologuing. We find out, as we joked about earlier, as long as you have someone's genetics, you can mind control them. And then Stern uses the guards to attack Sam and Joaquin, and then Ruth shows up and helps fight them off. They get kind of briefly arrested. Things go kind of poorly as we head towards Celestial Island. We learn that the leader's plot is to cause President Ross to Hulk out, because he has been poisoning him with radiation pills for years. Sam ends up saving or diffusing the situation by taking down the mind-controlled pilots, and then this is what causes President Ross to calm down, not Hulk out in the middle of a ship in the middle of the ocean. And so Having foiled his plan, we come back to New York, where the leader turns himself in for reasons, and then through playing a recording, triggers Ross turning into the Red Hulk, and then we have a fight between him and Sam that ends with Sam being able to talk down the Red Hulk. And then we then go to the raft where President Ross is imprisoned. We have he takes responsibility for his actions. Crazy talk. And then we get a post-credit scene where Stearns warns Sam about something bad is coming. And so, but that's kind of our overview of the plot. Let's jump in and discuss some characters. So what did you think of our leads of Anthony Mackie and Harrison Ford? And I think you're muted in Discord.
I had to look up. Hello.
You're back.
I had to Google because Ross was recast to Harrison Ford. I had to look up who he was in the other movies / the actor. So I just had a moment of connecting the dots to previous movies. So putting a new old face to the name, because he's existed in the past.
And kind of with that, I do want to say, rest in peace, William Hurt passed away before they could, I believe, film this movie. So I don't think there was ever a cut or any scenes with him in it. And so that is why.
That is why there
Harrison
was a
Ford
recast.
Steps in.
So in general, I thought it was a good, it was fun to revisit that sort of relationship with a new character taking up the mantle of Captain America. Because there's always been a fraught relationship between that role of Captain America and the Ross character. Because we see that in Civil War and everything. I would have just loved this movie to be entirely them. Get rid of the green brain guy altogether and have this conflict between the two of them. Maybe have green brain guy, who I'm going to keep calling green brain guy, much more casually in the background pulling the strings, but not as present, because that's the relationship between Sam / Captain America and Ross is well established, and there's lots of good conflicts there, especially post Endgame and trying to get things back on track and Celestial Island. You could still easily do a lot of that plot line that was in there with having more of the focus on the two of them sort of butting heads over things. Because one of the things that we get at the beginning is that he wants Sam to restart the Avengers. And he's so hesitant about that. And there's a lot of good things to explore in that, because he's accepted the role of Captain America as something that he is now. But now he has to take on the responsibilities that aren't just punching people in the face. So I loved what we had, especially with those two as the leads, but I wanted to explore more of that.
Yeah, I agree. I love Anthony Mackie. And I'm so happy that we're seeing him as the title character now. I mean, of course he was in Falcon and the Winter Soldier as well, but I'm very excited to see him fully as Captain America, and I'm very excited that we're going to be seeing more of this character, because spoilers, he doesn't die. He survives fighting a Hulk. And so I really liked his performance, and I really liked what he brings as more of the everyman than Steve Rogers ever was. And I like this idea of this is what Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness did really poorly. I like the idea that in this film, like, Sam is still dealing with the struggle that he had in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Should he take the super soldier serum? Is he enough? Like, does he need to be more to be Captain America?
Yeah.
And like, but whereas like that was such a main focus of the Falcon and Winter Soldier, I like that conflict in him is not gone in this movie, but it's also not the central plot in the same way WandaVision to Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness is the exact same plot for Wanda.
Yeah.
And I liked getting like, because it should not be that like no one resolves their internal doubts and conflicts that quickly.
No.
And I like that we still got to see him dealing with that doubt and needing to be talked up, and like getting to hear that scene towards the end of Joaquin and him talking, and getting to hear like I don't know how you're always so confident. I don't know how you always know what you're doing, where Sam doesn't feel that way about himself.
This young kid, especially, who's like looked up to him, like he's the Falcon, has always been the kid's favorite of all of them, because he was the most human or one of the most human in his abilities.
Yeah. It's similar to like Clint Barton and Kate Bishop as the Hawkeyes.
Yeah.
Like Kate looks up to Clint because he is someone that she can aspire to she doesn't need superheroes to aspire to her. And I think that that's really cool that we get to see this side of it with Sam. And then something that I saw, I think it was on Screen Crush. One of the things that they brought up is that Sam's superpower is that he's a counselor. Like he knows how to communicate with people and help them. And I really like that as like a character trait for Captain America. That like, of course, he does plenty of punching and wing stabbing and stuff like that. But like one of his core traits is his ability to be compassionate and have empathy. And I think that's a great trait to represent. And so I really liked that. For Harrison Ford and Thaddeus Ross, man, I wish this had not been recast, because it's so hard for like Thaddeus Ross's climatic performance to be from someone else that has not been the person playing this character for so long. Like,
it is a scenario that they didn't have any control over.
Right. Again, this kind of falls in the same category, of course, as Black Panther Wakanda Forever, of like, they didn't have a choice because Chadwick passed away. So in that one, they worked it into the narrative that T'Challa also died. But like for this one, it's very hard to see that, or to see this performance in a way that I feel like a lot of people are going to not even recognize that this was the same character.
Again, I Googled it not 15 minutes ago to like make the connection, because I knew the character had been recast, but I didn't know why, or like I had just forgotten William Hurst's face, because he's less common a character within franchise.
Yeah. It's really interesting because like William in his role as Thaddeus is one of the like has played the character in like more like MCU movies than most other characters, which is like really interesting. Like, but he's been such a background character.
Yeah, he's much more of a side character.
Yeah. So all of that said, I loved seeing Harrison Ford in this. Like, I think he did a great job in this role, and I was very excited that we got to see him like kind of take this mantle on. I think he did great representing like the internal struggle of like trying to be a better person. And not like even before like the Hulk, we like find out for sure that it's the Hulk thing. It's also unclear if he even knows that. And I don't think he does until he actually Hulks out at the end. I think he knows something's going on, but like he doesn't know that. And so I really liked Ford's performance. I know I've heard some criticism that there's too much Harrison Ford. We'll talk about this later on. He's literally the antagonist of this movie. Like he is the co-lead with Anthony Mackie. And so I do think it's like, it's funny that kind of in the way of like, I feel like people are like, oh, the leader's the villain. No, he's not. Like, Thaddeus Ross is the villain.
He's just the cause of the villain.
Yeah. And so yeah, I again overall loved it. I loved their conflict, and I love that. This goes to what you were saying earlier. I love that they did not pave over the conflict that has existed between these two characters from before they were Captain America and the President.
Yeah.
Like, they still have that tension, they still have that distrust, and I really liked that. Like that they kept that going. For some side recurring characters, we also got the return of Carl Lumbly as Isaiah Bradley, and then Danny Ramirez back as Joaquin Torres / the new Falcon. What did you think of the two of them?
I Joaquin / new Falcon, because it's fun to see and have side by side like what is essentially a parallel to Sam's growing into his role as Captain America, but from the position of this kid has literally never actually done any superhero fighting at all. So he's like literally a kid coming into this versus a veteran superhero fighter stepping into a new role, being that kid's mentor, as well as just like for a franchise again that's been around for so long, we get to then see a reoccurring character mentor a new kid, which has been a theme of a lot of the stuff coming out more recently, with like the Hawkeyes and things, kind of like a passing of the torch without like giving up your own torch in a way.
Yeah.
So it's fun to see that kind of dynamic with a character we know who's going through the exact same struggles as the kid they're mentoring, but in a completely different context because of just their past experiences. So I loved having that, because it's just like, oh, look at you, you're all grown up, and now you're the one like teaching a kid how to do the thing because you didn't have someone teaching you how to do that thing. Because literally this is the second wave of heroes coming in to this franchise, if you will. Like, the first wave didn't have mentors unless you're Thor, who grew up knowing his skills and powers, but like Steve Rogers, Iron Man, Tony Stark, like all of those guys were handed their skill, or they built their skill
in a cave.
And they had in a cave with a box of scraps. It's one of my favorite lines from the entire franchise.
It's fantastic.
Like, they had to learn how to use their things without really any guidance from someone who had been in their position. And now we get to see them like actually give that help that they never received. So I loved that relationship between Joaquin and Sam, especially because like that part of, as you were talking about, like his conflict with taking the super soldier serum, like stemmed from essentially an Icarus flying too close to the sun, with Joaquin trying to blow up one of the missiles during a fight, and like he got severely injured. And so Sam just felt so bad because someone under his watch got hurt. And then Isaiah Bradley,
so he was the guy in the suit that they talk about, his suit that there's the one he got married in, and then he's the one that attempts to shoot the president.
Okay, yeah, the Sam's mentor.
Yeah.
I thought he was great. I also love those kinds of mentor relationships on screen, of like, it's a very different kind of mentor relationship, because it's like more of a real life mentor-mentee relationship that you see in the real world of like just an older guy taking in a young guy and trying to help him lead the best life possible.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking especially within that cultural dynamic of Black men who don't necessarily always have like a father figure in their lives, like having someone step in and take on that role for them. So it's much more of like a father son rather than like teacher student, even though there is some teacher student vibes in there, because it doesn't undermine the fact that he's got these super soldier skills and talent, but it focuses much more on the relationship between the two of them. And I thought it was great to have that like positive role model and relationship on screen for people to see that it is possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll echo what you said about Joaquin. I wish we had gotten a bit more of him going before we got this movie. It kind of feels like a weird jump to like he's immediately like flying in the Falcon suit.
Yeah.
But like I understand that like they did the handoff of him becoming Falcon in Falcon and Winter Soldier, but like having just not seen him since then, it feels weird, a little strange there. Then I like the idea that he is also like, in addition to being like the mentee, he's also the guy in the chair. Like he's kind of the tech guy. He's the one that's solving stuff. He's the one that stops the leader's mind wipe stuff. And I like that even though he's becoming the Falcon, he is not the exact same skill set as Sam.
Yeah.
And I really like that
he's not
like while the mantles, yeah, exactly. Like while like they are similar, like obviously there's going to be similarities between the characters and stuff like that. Like it is not like he's like Joaquin is closer to a Tony Stark than Sam is.
Yeah.
Just in the terms of like having like a higher like problem solving techiness, and like that's not something that we really see in Sam in the same way. And so I like that we're seeing that. And then for Isaiah, played by Carl, man, I could watch him act in like anything. I feel like he's the only character that I feel like owned every scene he was in.
Every single one.
Like, I feel like for most other people in the movie, not necessarily at the actor's fault, but I feel like for most every other character in this film, there's something that feels off or wonky or like a motivation that doesn't quite make sense, except for Isaiah Bradley, that
it all makes perfect sense.
Everything's fantastic, fantastically acted. Like he nails Carl nails every scene of this character and owns all of them. Like, such a good take. And I'm so happy that we got to see Isaiah again. Like, I think he's an extremely interesting part, both for the commentary of what he says about our own history in the United States, but also for what he brings into the MCU as, like, we know that the governments have been trying to replicate the super soldier serum and it hasn't worked. And like that even ties in with this story where the Hulk was intended to be an attempt to replicate the super soldier serum. And so like we have all of these other versions of these characters that are all tied to like Steve Rogers, Captain America, in that way, without it being the, well, here's another villain that Tony Stark wronged. Like I like that we still have that connection with all of these characters to that central premise of like the super soldier side of things. And so, A+, man, I want an Isaiah like mini series or something.
Yes.
Like,
or something.
Cause like we know
even
his
just
son,
like a short film.
Or, his grandson, his nephew is the Patriot.
Yeah.
And so, like, give me, like, a 3-episode thing of him telling a story to the Patriot.
Yeah, it's and, like Ant-Man style.
Yeah.
Whoever the, like, Ant-Man's friend, Jose, no, it's not Jose, whenever he goes on storytelling rants like that, but from, like, the old man kind of way. He's sitting there on his porch with a drink, going, back in my day. But it's great.
Yeah.
All the way through.
Yeah. I would love to see more of him. And then one of our, in terms of potentially relevant for the future characters, one of our few new characters is Shira Haas playing Ruth Bat Saraf. She's the former Black Widow and is Israeli. She is loosely based on the character of Sabra from the comic books. They did some changes to her character based on geopolitics that are going on right now. What did you think of her role in this movie?
Just kind of there. She existed. Like, it's not for worse or for better. Like, it definitely felt like they're building up some more like Black Widow stuff to happen down the line or whatever. Like, they're building up a story around that character for much further down the line. We've seen a lot of this stuff with Marvel over the past, again, 17 years. Like, Clint was introduced in the Thor movie. Like, he has a scene in the Thor movie, and then we get much more of him later on down the line. And that's kind of like what her character felt like. Of like, she's involved in this world. Like, they're planting her now as like a character of like, oh yeah, she's been involved with the president in terms of being an employee and all of these other things. Like, she's around, she's here, she helps a little bit in a scenario because she's there and it's convenient for her to help because they need more hands on deck or whatever. So like, I'm very neutral. Like, and it makes sense that there would be more women from the Red Room that are just out and about and exist, because it's like, yeah, that makes sense, that tracks. Like,
and that's one of the things that I like about her from like a meta narrative standpoint is like there should be a bunch of widows around.
Yeah,
like, we don't
there should be a bunch
number,
of widows around.
But like
it's not just Scarlett Johansson's whatever her name is, that I'm blanking on. Like, it's not just like 3 of them, 2 or 3 of them.
Right.
There's multiple people who went through that program. So it makes sense that, you know, she would exist in this world as someone who went through that. And it would make sense that, you know, the head of the president's defense team, or whatever you want to call it, would be someone from that program. Like, is it necessarily the smartest idea? Not always. But you know what? They have the skills.
Yeah.
So, you know, just one of those things of like, she existed in the movie. Like, she didn't add to it. She didn't take away from it. We've seen it before where they introduce characters early on.
Yeah. My biggest issue with her from a like in the movie or in the MCU perspective is she has the very hard job of being the worst SX widow. Of like, she's going to never like measure up to Florence Pugh's Yelena. And like, I feel like that, like, she's going to kind of get stuck, at least with how they presented her here. She's going to always get stuck as the serious ex-widow. Yep. And that's going to not connect with fans nearly as much as the goofy side of Elena has bonded so many characters to that take on the character.
Yeah.
And when it comes to this movie, it's pretty apparent that major parts of her character got cut.
Yeah.
To the point that like we see her in a superhero costume that she never does anything in.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm curious. She is kind of like what you're saying. I would not be surprised if 10 years from now she's in the Avengers in whatever phase 7 we're in. But I also would not be surprised if we literally never see her again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
they're definitely setting something up. Whether or not they follow through with that is something else. But like, this isn't even our 2nd rodeo. This is like our 8th rodeo with this kind of stuff when it comes to Marvel. So like, the audience comes to expect, oh, it's a side character who may or may not be important down the road. 10 years later, they may or may not be important.
Yeah. And then as our final major character, again, not hitting every character, we get the return of Tim Blake Nelson as Samuel Stern / the leader. Green head guy or whatever it is that you called him later.
Green brain guy.
Green brain guy. Honestly, I mean, I feel like Tim did a great, like as good of a job as he could have done with what he was given here. I like how gross he was, like with like his like brain literally growing out of his head. I think that was a fun take versus I think in the comics he just has a larger head. But so I liked that change. The leader definitely falls into the smart villain trope that I hate, which is like you're telling us that he is super smart and he does not have contingencies for things happening.
Yeah.
Like, so he using mind, we skipped over this and then like recount, but when Bradley is in prison, the leader has like mind controls a guard, has them kill the other shooters, but not Bradley, because there's an 89% chance that Sam will turn around to check on Bradley, and he doesn't, and then Sam figures things out. It's like, he's supposed to be one of the smartest people, and it's implied has been pulling the strings for a long time, to the point that there are theories that he could have been the one that like created the Sokovian Accords, like, and is feeding things to Ross like for years.
He's like a mastermind, like a how Thanos was set up for years and years and years as this mastermind pulling all these strings, like another one of those.
Except like, so that then it's like, it'd be like if Thanos was built up and then he just got decked by Hulk at the beginning of the movie and that was it.
And that was it. Game over.
And it's like, it's the, like, you're super smart, but your plan makes literally no sense.
Again, this goes back to my complaint at the beginning. Like, you give us a very hand-wavy science explanation for whatever it is he's doing, and that's that. But he's supposed to be a really smart guy. Like, give us, if you're going to say he has that information, then give us that information.
Exactly. And like, even at the end where his plan involves him turning himself in so that someone at the press briefing will say that he has been captured and then he can play this audio. Like, this is the dumbest plan. And again, for someone who is supposed to be one of the smartest people, he's really dumb.
Yeah.
Like, and to the point that, like, going to what you said earlier, honestly, I just wish he was barely in the movie. Like, I don't think that we needed a lot of the scenes that he's in. I think he could have, like, literally phoned it in. Like, he spends a lot of time on the phone talking with people. I think we could have just had that.
Yeah.
Like,
This movie definitely, when it comes to like villains and bad guys, falls into the same trap that Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness fell into, of the do one or the other, not both. They should have done the Red Hulk or Big Brain Guy, not both. You could still have Big Brain Smart Guy involved, but very much taking a back seat. And especially since we haven't seen him in 15 years, and 15 years ago it was just a post-credit scene in the Hulk. Like, this would have been a good opportunity to like introduce him, kind of, and maybe have him get arrested at the end, but like not be as present as he was. So like, it definitely falls into that trap of pick one or the other. Like, you can still have both, just in a slightly better way.
Yeah, like, I mean, as like a similar example, I think we could have had Stern be manipulating Ross to Hulk out without the mind control plot.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like as like a specific thing, like, he could have still been hiring people. He could have still like hired the Serpent Society to do things and be like orchestrating stuff, and just not done it via mind control. And we could have skipped all of that exposition on how
that didn't even make any sense.
Right.
When you spend 3 seconds thinking about it, like.
So, yeah, I think that there's a lot that they could have done with rewrites for the leader. One of the major cuts for this we didn't mention, but Giancarlo Esposito plays Sidewinder, who's a member of the Serpent Society. We know from on-set photos that there were supposed to be other members of the Serpent Society, and they got cut from the final film. Honestly, I would have loved it if Stern, being the leader, was the reveal at the end, and it was just like Serpent Society versus Falcon, and then we find out that it's the leader that's manipulating the Serpent Society to get Hulk or get Ross to Hulk out. Would have been perfectly fine. I think that would have like served the story just as well, and like we could have like legitimately cut Stern down to talking to the Serpent Society and not interacting with the leads. Like, again, through no fault of the actor. I do want to emphasize that.
Like the actors are doing what they can with what they've been given. Yeah. So,
so those are our major characters. Any final thoughts on characters as a whole before we jump into kind of talking through some plot?
I loved the scene with Bucky.
Mm-hmm.
That needed a little bit of dialogue rewrite, but it was fun to have a Bucky scene because it just makes sense with Sam, like they're best friends. So it makes sense for him to make an appearance. Also, apparently he's becoming a congressman. Yeah. This is news to me. Okay.
Yeah.
I was
so
like,
that's something that we high level knew because I think it's confirmed that he wins the election by Thunderbolts.
Okay.
And that when it comes to like by the time Thunderbolts happens, he is a congressman.
Okay.
And so
interesting.
I think that's confirmed. But yeah, so like that was something that we knew, but we had no clue how he was going to get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I liked Sebastian's cameo. I'm glad that we saw him for the same reasons that you're saying. I like that it also, it doesn't like explain why he's not there, but it gives it like a reasonable, like he has like, not every character can be in every film. He's got stuff going on and he can't.
That's the kind of hand waving explanation that makes sense. It's like, oh yeah, he's off running for Congress. Okay, I'll take that.
Yeah.
That's like a little strange, but okay. I'll accept it. But a flashy light and a song to mind control someone? No. If you're gonna go weird, you gotta commit.
Yeah. I will shout out my local theater on the flashing light thing. They actually had like a warning sign.
Oh, that's
like before
good.
You went into the theater that was like, hey, be aware that there are some scenes that feature flashing lights. And I thought that was really cool. Like, I was really confused when I saw the sign going into it, like not knowing what that meant in terms of like for the movie. But I think it was really cool that they put that up just as an extra precaution for people. And so shout out to the Alamo Drafthouse. But yeah, let's jump into plot. What are some of your favorite scenes, moments, highlights from an overall narrative perspective?
I loved the Bucky scene, as I just mentioned.
See my previous point on the Bucky
scene. My previous point, because that was also a good moment for Sam of like debating with the super soldier serum. That still wasn't super heavy-handed in that. The other one wasn't so much a scene as a moment, but you know his little like airplane scout things that he sends out. Something that I thought was really cool was that he has one attached to the shield on the underside. So he can, like when he throws it, his way of getting it back is it just flies the shield back to him. And it's super cool. It's just like, oh, that's fun. Like that's a fun little detail that's unique to Sam as Captain America. Like he does also do like the more traditional boomerang thing, but he has on top of it like a little flying guy who's like, yeah, I'm going to use some jets to get this back to you now. That's pretty fun. Other scenes or whatever, shout out to the giant body in the middle of the ocean finally getting addressed.
Yeah.
Because, it's been years now, and that's just kind of been sitting there with nothing.
On the Red Wing thing, I really liked the dogfight fight scene that we got in this film.
Yeah.
More than I expected to, honestly. And I really like that it wasn't just like, I have vibranium wings, look at me fly through and stop stuff. Like, I liked the conflict in that scene of like, we're trying to stop the Japan fighters from shooting at us. We're also trying to stop the mind-controlled American fighters from firing on Japan. And then it's the Doctor Who thing of everyone lives, trying to like find that solution. There definitely was a goofiness of it, of like, and this was in the trailers, but where Sam throws the shield and hits missiles. Okay.
Okay, that's a little bit out there.
Yeah. That one's a little hand wavy, but I did like, kind of like what you're saying. I think there's some really cool creative uses of like the power set and Red Wing, of like, there's a specific scene where Sam is being shot at while he's flying, and he sends out Red Wing with the shield to block the fire. And I'm like, that's really creative.
That's the scene I was thinking of in my head.
I liked that a lot, because that's, again, not that Steve Rogers couldn't have done something like that, but like, that's something that we didn't see him do, and is now something that is in their pocket to use with Anthony Mackie's version.
Yeah.
To give him something different, of like, he has this thing that flies around that he can use to manipulate the shield in different ways. And so I liked that a lot. It was super goofy. I loved him surfing on the missile to push it underwater.
Yes.
Very cheesy. Very like, no reason at all to do that, but I loved it, and I think it was great.
A little bit dramatic, yes.
Yeah.
Is it the kind of drama we like? Is it the kind of extra sparkles that we want?
Yeah.
Yes.
Should we been a little bit more focused on, I don't know, preventing a war? Maybe.
Probably.
But that was really cool.
We're going to do some cool things in here too while we're at it.
Yeah. I think one of my biggest disappointments for cool scenes is that the wait for it scene at the beginning was in the trailer, where Sam goes creates a sonic boom, lands and then uses the sonic boom to knock down the enemies.
Yeah.
I really thought that scene was cool, and I wish it would have been a surprise.
Yeah.
I'm right there with that's you. Something of you put the joke in the trailer, so now the joke isn't impactful.
Yeah.
But I love that. I would have loved to have also seen that return. It's kind of weird that we never see him use that. It
happens
again.
Once. Yeah. We see him use the wings and the shield as a protective casing again.
Yeah.
Why can't we bring back the cool sonic boom again?
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen that more. And then I already mentioned all of the Isaiah Bradley scenes. I legitimately think that those are some of the best scenes. Specifically, you get the one where Bradley is back in prison and he's talking to Sam, and they're just kind of talking one-on-one, and then just the cinematography of the head-on
the centered
shot
head.
For those.
Yep.
And where they're not I guess they are technically looking at camera, where it's them talking to us as the audience as they have this conversation. That scene was super cool, and I really liked that as well. I'm trying to think what else. This will be my Black Widow thing that I've been teasing this whole time. So, and we can kind of transition this to least favorite things as well with this. I feel while this is a much better movie than Black Widow was, I feel this struggles from a lot of the same problems of but why that we had in Black Widow. And not just in terms of, but why does the science work this way that we kind of got a little bit of in Black Widow as well. And like, I feel like they did better in this one where Sam is a normal person, but he's surviving all of these things with no serious harm until the very end. But like, I feel like from a meta standpoint of like, but why is this movie here? Like, why are we just now getting the sequel to Incredible Hulk, Eternals, Falcon and the Winter Soldier? Like, why is this here? And I don't feel like there's a good explanation for why that happened. Kind of in the same way of like, it doesn't make sense for the Black Widow movie to kick off Phase 4. Like, why is that film like presented there? Like, I kind of felt that same way as like a dislike of this one. Of, I feel like if we would have gotten this movie like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, like I feel like we would have been in much better shape. Like, just in terms of it making more sense. Like this would have been really interesting as like not the movie immediately after Eternals, but like the one after that. Like,
Yeah.
that way we could have had Sam as Captain America much quicker. And then like, I feel like that would have just made more sense for like the meta narrative. We'll talk about this a little bit more in our final section, but like, I feel like that's like somewhat like one of my biggest complaints. And then I feel like the other thing that really bothered me is basically any villain in this film I did not really like, other than Thaddeus Ross. Of like I feel like the Serpent Society stuff is fine. Like there's not a lot of it, but like it's fine. The leader we talked about a lot, really don't like anything that he's doing in this movie.
Yeah.
And like that, a lot of my biggest complaints in this film stem from that plot line feeling like they chopped it up as part of the reshoots and probably shouldn't have. I'm curious if you noticed this. There's also probably one of the most egregious like green screen scenes that I've seen in a long time at the very end of the film where like Hulk is talking to Falcon or to Captain America and he's like looking down and it's very clearly green screen and like it looks rough. And when like we specifically are supposed to have been slowing down MCU like movies to get better effects, and broadly speaking the effects in this one were really good, like that scene kind of stands out as a sore thumb of like this was not done well. What did you think? What are some of your least favorite parts of the film?
I mean, I've complained about a lot of them. I mean, there was a lot of dialogue that just really needed to be rewritten, which is one of my biggest complaints, because that's something that I'm going to notice. A very specific part of that is, like you and I talking right now, we're not going to use each other's names to our faces. Yeah. Because you and I know each other. We're friends. We have a pre-established like friendship, and like we've known each other for a while. So we're just chatting. We're not going to really, like, what did you think, Cameron? Unless it's a group setting of more than 2 or 3 people and you're trying to like get someone's attention specifically. There were a lot of scenarios in this movie where it was just 2 people talking back and forth in very much a similar setup where they were using each other's names to each other's faces. That just is not the kind of like natural flow of conversation that anyone would have in a day-to-day setup like that, even if it is like, oh, the world is ending. Even with Ross and Sam, like they're not friends necessarily, but they have this pre-established relationship with each other, where like the way that they communicate in the movie versus in like what that would look like in the real world is just completely different. So a lot of the dialogue sort of staggers because and stumbles because it's inherently just not how we communicate on a very surface level. And so that really caught me multiple times of like, no one would phrase this way, let alone to someone they're familiar with and have a pre-established relationship with of some kind. So like that just happens a lot in the movie, and that's something that stumbled or really got to me a lot. It's just like, okay, I understand what you're trying to say, but it's not natural.
Yeah, it makes it come across much more mechanical.
Yeah. Yeah, so like that's one of my big things aside from the hand wavy science-y, like I'm willing to forgive implausible science if you put in the effort to make it sound plausible, even with, made up adamantium metal or whatever. Like, okay, like you've put some amount of decent thought into how this actually works. But when it's just like DNA files, flashing light, song, assume it works, then it's like, no, I'm not going to just assume it works.
Yeah.
So those are my big
adamantium is like a really good example of this. As like adamantium, what is it? It's one of the strongest metals. Why? Because it is. Cool. That's all I need to know about this metal.
You don't need to come up with an insane explanation for it. You just tell me that it is.
Yeah, and like the same thing with like vibranium. It absorbs and can be used to release kinetic energy. Why? Because that's the property that it has. And like we can accept that side of it. And it's like I going back to like the mind control thing, like you could have just said, how is he controlling these people? Money. Cool. He bribed them.
Great.
He's like he's extorting them.
We see that all the time. It's even in the real world. That is so believable. Like, of course he would bribe people with money.
Yeah. It just like we did not need any more like into the wonkiness of the leader's plan than like, in fact, that's probably overcomplicated for someone as smart as him. Kind of going to like my issue with that character. Like it sure feels like it would have just been a whole lot easier to find 5 people that have an issue with President Ross to shoot at him.
Yeah.
Not shoot him specifically. He does not want to kill the president.
No.
Like
he just wants to cause a scene
at him. Yeah.
Yeah.
And cause him to Hulk out. Like, I feel like you could pretty easily have found 5 people that were going to be there and done this.
Yeah. And who either hate him or could use $20,000 that you can, wire transfer from some CIA black market bank account offshores. Because apparently you have access to that. Like, just, it's a world of superheroes. But we're still going to believe that you paid someone to try and terrorize the president. Like, that's still equally plausible when you've set up that this exists in present-day America. Like, we are very aware of what's happening in the world around us. We're going to believe, oh yeah, he bribed them.
Is it good enough?
It's good enough! Like, yeah, I can see that happening. And I believe it happening.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say. I'm very curious about if we could get the initial script for this movie. I'm very curious to what that would look like.
I was saying to my roommate when I got home yesterday that the movie definitely feels like the base script or the base like story outline for this was rather coherent and like all like put together, and then through the process of rewrites and reshoots and things, it all just fell apart. Because there's definitely lots of elements there that just show that there was something bigger happening / more coherent throughout, with all of these moving parts of Ross and the leader and Sam and everyone else, that like it all connects. But when cuts happened in the entire process, there isn't like. And then with the the widow woman, as Ruth, when she had the suit on, that we just never see her in again. Like, there's lots of little things that are missing that, unfortunately, because they're missing, a lot of things about the movie fell apart. And we can tell that it's falling apart because something's missing. Yeah. But that implies that there was something missing that belonged there to begin with. So, like, I would love to see the first script or the first outline, because it does feel like there is something more solid to begin with.
Fully agree. With that, let's jump into our final section for tonight, which is what's next / the future of the MCU. So there's a couple big revelations from the end of this. I have it as a third question on our thing, but I want to do this first. Are we in a Brave New World at the end of this film? Like,
I don't really know. I don't really know. That question has not really been answered.
Yeah. I don't really know what the Brave New World is. Like,
yeah.
Is it supposed to be that Sam is in a Brave New World because he is now like fully embraced being Captain America? Like, and this kind of goes back to what you were just talking about with the outline thing of like, because originally this was going to be New World Order.
Yeah.
They changed it to Brave New World. And so like, I'm really curious about like if there were plot changes there, because with the way that this movie ends with both President Ross and Stern being imprisoned, like
that's like a closing.
Yeah.
To a world story rather than an opening to a brand new world.
Right. And so I'm curious to the title of the film from that regard, because this does not feel like it challenges the status quo of what we were like expecting of this movie in a way that I think I would have expected ending like with a movie with that title, to the point that like it's not addressed in this film, but like the end of Secret Invasion, like that one is, I mean, if we ever see anything for how bad that show did, but like the finale of that sets up a radical change to the world.
You could also call the first Thor movie Brave New World.
Right.
And you'd be like, yeah, I can see that. Like,
yeah.
Like, he ends up in a, brand new place, and then through all of his character development, by the end, he is like, his character development has put him in a new position.
Yeah.
I don't really see any of that.
Yeah. And this will go into the next thing. One of the big things that we obviously get introduced and that we have talked about is the existence of adamantium finally in the MCU. We can finally say the name after the Fox merger. And one of the things that I've heard is the idea of like, oh, this new world is one that has
X-Men,
or is like influenced by, well, X-Men from a meta standpoint, but also
I want to say X-Men. I want to say the word X-Men. Bring in the X-Men.
Yeah, and like, because they hit on it during this movie of like, vibranium is great, but it's controlled by Wakanda.
Yeah.
Adamantium is something that theoretically the whole world could have, which could lead to this brave new world. But we don't necessarily get any of that set up in this.
Yeah.
And so I've heard theories about that. But now, kind of going to what you just said, we finally get adamantium.
Which like, implies
what are your thoughts on us finally getting this in the MCU?
I'm excited and cautious. Because, of course it implies the existence of the X-Men, because it implies the existence of Wolverine specifically. And if Wolverine exists, then the X-Men exist. Um, but also knowing how the past 25 years of movie legal rights have existed. Um, from my base functioning knowledge of the comics, on 4546B, which is core default Earth, the Avengers and the X-Men exist at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But because of movie legal rights, that has not been the case in the MCU for the past 25 years. It has been sort of set up that we are existing in the MCU on 4546B, default Earth, as I'm going to henceforth call it, default Earth, where the X-Men have not been existing for the past 20 years because they haven't been allowed to say the word X-Men. There have been shifted over replacements, like the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, for example. But they've had to be kind of retconned in certain ways to fit into legalities. So I'm cautious and curious at the same time of like how they're going to handle that scenario of assuming that merger does happen where X-Men eventually show up. I'm interested to see how they do that, because the X-Men also have a considerably longer history to the lore. Magneto was involved with World War II, etc., etc. I am realizing how much of a nerd this makes me sound for knowing this kind of stuff, but I am okay with that.
I'm about to say all of this with you, so you're good.
like there's so much that goes into the lore of the X-Men alone that establishes them to be like, to have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, essentially. So really, in my head, the only logical way I can see them handling that is having a group of pre-established X-Men shift over from a parallel universe, or like come over from a parallel universe, be like, hey, like you guys exist, in our version of Earth. We're coming to hang out or whatever. However, but like they're leaning heavily in this movie into the existence of adamantium, definitely enough to imply that they're going to be doing stuff with X-Men in the future. Because again, Marvel's been around for a while. They're setting something up when they plant something like adamantium or a side character or whatever else. So I'm just like, it could get really complicated and messy really fast if they aren't smart about it. And I'm curious to see, because they're already dealing with so many balls in the air, if you will, with just like the Avengers, like all of the different characters that feed into the Avengers and feed into like the Hell's Kitchen team with Daredevil and Jessica Jones and Iron Fist and all of those characters as well, like the B team, if you will. That like if you throw the X-Men in there, you've suddenly got 20, 30 more characters to handle on top of the 20 or 30 you've already established. So it's going to get messy.
Yeah. For me, I really hope that they never retcon that mutants have been here the whole time.
Yeah.
We of course have the confirmation that Miss Marvel has a mutant gene, and then presumably so does Namor, and so because he is like one of the like first mutants in the comics, and I would really like it if they don't retcon that Professor Xavier has been here the whole time, Magneto has been here the whole time. I really hope they don't do that. What I've been saying, and this is similar to what you just said, is I really want whatever they do in Secret Wars / Doomsday, I want them to bring over mutants in large quantities from another world into the main like MCU timeline, because that also gives us the reason, or a better reason, for the world to hate and fear mutants specifically, rather than all people with powers. And so where they would be like literally aliens from an alternate timeline, like,
let alone
I think that would be
in
really
that
cool.
alternate timeline, like it's literally human beings who have gone, like it's like an evolution thing.
Yeah.
That's all how the whole mutant things works, is it's just through base default evolution that and then like Wolverine is, his skeleton was then scientifically enhanced or whatever. But the base default for the mutants is just, they're all people. They just won the genetics lottery in the case of evolution or whatever.
Then with the adamantium as well, I think a big thing for me is I don't want them to ever recast Logan, or in the short term, I don't want them to recast Logan. I would love this idea, and we get this in Deadpool, of course, Deadpool and Wolverine. This idea that there are people throughout the timelines that look up to the Wolverine from their timeline. And I like this idea of these people coming and telling the story of Wolverine once they come into our world. And then that being something that inspires some bad guy scientist to try to replicate the Weapon X program. And then like that's how we then get our version, whether it's X-23, whether it's a different version like of that style character. I think that would be a really interesting way of like them trying to like replicate this thing that other people did in
that they've heard
timelines.
about, like rumors have talked about or whatever.
And that's how we end up eventually getting our Wolverine in the main MCU timeline. I think that would be really interesting. Then also short term, I'm curious to how they're going to have adamantium show up. There's a handful of non-mutant characters that have adamantium weapons or things like that could be helpful or could be interesting. Like one of them in specific is Bullseye. Get some of his bones reinforced with adamantium as well. And so I could see that being something that could show up at some point. Characters like have like kind of generic adamantium weapons as well, since it's so much more plentiful than vibranium. Like it's something that eventually can just kind of start showing up around as like generic goons have weapons, or even like some of our like other characters. Like I was looking it up for the podcast. I guess there are some times in the comics where like Moon Knight gets adamantium versions of his weapons. And so stuff like that. I'm excited for that style stuff of just give some characters like a wink and a nod power up because they have now gotten stronger weapons than what they had before.
Give them a +1 sword rather than just a sword.
Yeah, we're already not like too like, again, kind of going to like the physics side that we're talking earlier. We're already not like big sticklers for like why is it strong? It is. Like we're not gonna like like, but I think that'd be a fun way to bring that in.
But it really is if you're gonna invent science for a thing, commit to it, even if your answer for why it is just that's just the way it is, because we'll accept that.
And then last question, I kind of want us to end on this little thought experiment. So we do end this film with Sam deciding that he is going to go assemble the Avengers. They presumably have not been assembled at the time of Thunderbolts based off the trailer that we have. And so what do you think is going to be Sam's goal? What kinds of characters would you like to see Sam assemble? Who would you like to see on this new Avengers team that we'll presumably see for Secret Wars / Doomsday?
I can see a lot of like younger characters stepping into pre-existing roles, almost like we see with Falcon, potentially with another Hawkeye, another Black Widow, that kind of thing. I could see a lot of that happening. sorry, where he goes for kind of like what he is familiar with in terms of
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I've worked with a Black Widow type, I've worked with a Iron Man type, because we're seeing Braveheart. I can see a lot of that coming in because they're also, just from a big overview, establishing the new generation
Mm-hmm.
of people coming into those roles of pre-existing heroes, basically another Iron Man, another Lady Thor, another etc etc etc. So I can definitely see, especially since Sam has this connection to um, essentially the next Falcon, like pulling people in for that. um, I am not super familiar with any of the lesser known heroes that are like
Mm-hmm.
not inspired by or based on the big five or big seven or whatever. So like I can't pull anything off the top of my hat of like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
this random side character who only had like an 8 comic run. um it would be fun though to see some new like characters. I say new, but like um some other heroes that aren't based on pre-existing things that now the majority of the world is familiar with. So like when the
Mm-hmm.
Ant-Man movie came out, I had never heard of Ant-Man before. Um and then he became like top 3 favorites when the first movie came out because I was like, this is genius. Like it's so dumb, but it's so good. I would love more of that where they dig into the depths of their records and pull out some of the silly superhero concepts or some of the more like unknowns and really lean into that and pull from the things that they have. And like it's fun to see like the next Falcon, the next
Mm-hmm.
Iron Man, the next Black Widow, but like we've also seen those stories with their original characters. So we want to see some new things, new
Mm-hmm.
power sets come in, even if at their core it's the same thing as I mean, Sam's essentially just a cross between Captain America and Iron Man.
Yeah.
Like that's just what that is. But it's still fun. It's something
Mm-hmm.
different. Like, um, you could have something that's a cross between Thor and Hawkeye or whatever. That would be pretty fun. Like, pull from the stuff that I know they have more than just those big seven.
Right.
I'm just listing random numbers. Um, that they can really play with, and I would love to see some of that different material.
Yeah. So for me, one of the things I hope we see is I want us to see Sam fail to assemble the Avengers.
Yeah.
Because one of my favorite comic book points, and I believe this is from the new Avengers, like this is literally how that one starts, is that you don't pick the Avengers respond when needed. And so
Yeah.
like the Avengers team is the one who are there when they are needed, and then that is what like causes this team to come back into existence. So
Mm-hmm.
like and when I say Sam fails to assemble the Avengers, I don't mean in like a Suicide Squad style way of like they're on a mission and a bunch of people die. But I love the idea of like Sam trying to like over engineer who we got to put the puzzle pieces together, but that's just like not how the Avengers work. And so I would love it if like we start out the Avengers with him doing some sort of recruitment, and that not working at all. Whether it's like the team doesn't work together, whether it ends up setting up some other teams, I think that could be really fun. If
Yeah.
like, hey, this team doesn't work, but out of it we get the champions, and like we
Yeah,
finally get that
and
team in
isn't
the
there like a
MCU.
Midwest Avengers that's just
Yeah,
based in Lake Michigan
yeah,
or whatever?
yeah. There's
And it's
also
just like,
West
okay,
Coast Avengers, like,
yeah, like
and
okay, like the A
yeah,
team is the New York Avengers, and then we just have these like subsets based around the country,
yeah,
these
and
branch
so yeah,
offs.
Yeah. So like when I say like Sam fails, I think that that's like a cool outcome, is it's not just like
Yeah.
fails in the sense of like people get hurt, it doesn't work, but fails in the sense of like the team is not cohesive and
They
something
just
has
don't
to
work
happen.
well together.
And then, yeah, that leads to West Coast Avengers, Midwest Avengers, champions. Obviously, like Defenders would fall in this. I just like the idea of us establishing some more teams
Yeah.
when there's so many in the Marvel comics. And so,
Yeah.
but then, yeah, so like through all of that, we get the team that steps up. And
Yeah.
this is the one that kind of, even if it's out of that core group, this is the one that like steps forward and then becomes the final like Avengers for the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And so for characters, I like the joke of like by the time they make the movie, the young Avengers are going to be the middle-aged Avengers. Of
Yeah.
like, and
Yeah.
so I like that idea of like bring in Miss Marvel, like Kate Bishop's Hawkeye, bring in like those other characters that we've been getting introduced to. And I like what you said. And I think that this would fit in really well with Sam's power set of like have him be the leader of the team. And he's like the emotional core, not like like he's there as the mentor of the team as he's leading it, not just I am the strongest one here. Look at me.
Yeah.
I think that would be a really cool way of having him encourage New Falcon, Miss Marvel, again, Hawkeye, like not in the sense of like removing them away from their other mentors, but in the sense that like we're giving them like a team now to look up to. I think that would be a really interesting way of taking that character or taking those characters and putting them in something that like that works out as a different version of the Avengers. And so that's kind of my hope and desire there. We'll see what happens, but yeah. And so with that, that's going to wrap up our spoiler cast of Captain America Brave New World. Any final thoughts before we go to our outro?
It's a fun time. No final thoughts.
Not really anything specific for me, other than to say I did enjoy this movie. I know like we definitely got into like least favorite parts and stuff like that. I feel like it's good as fans to say, hey, I liked this thing, but here are the things that I didn't think were great or perfect.
100%.
And vice versa. Yeah. Like you can be a fan and not think everything in that fandom is the best thing ever.
Yeah.
And so, with that, going into our announcements, as a reminder, our upcoming book club is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. We are still trying to find a time to make that work. Unclear if it's going to end up happening in February, but that is still what's on the docket for us. So stay tuned for that. And then you can also, as we go into our outro, you can find us as OneGeek411 around the internet. Join our Discord server. Shoot us an email at 1stgeek411@gmail.com. Watch live on Twitch and YouTube, and then find the videos over on YouTube. And then you can also find us at our personal social media. Mine is Humar Whittle.
Mine is I am not prepared with an I am the prepared.
And it's been a great week.
Go outside.
Get a cool set of wings and fly around.
Yeah.